right. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you for being on time, and people will join us as they come in. I am Wendy Singer, Executive Director for No Shame on You. And it is just wonderful to have you. If you're new to these, this is part of our monthly Feed Your Mind series, which we do on a variety of different topics every single month. So now that you're registered, you'll see these when they come up in our e-blast. I want to thank you on behalf of our board of directors, staff, and volunteers to warmly welcome you to today's program. No Shame on You is dedicated to reshaping attitudes about mental health, elevating conversations, and disarming stigma. We support young people as well as those who support them with tools to understand, talk about, and respond to mental health challenges. We fulfill our mission through comprehensive community outreach programs, workshops, team programs, free resources, and a robust online presence with over 120,000 social media partners. We partner with organizations throughout the Chicagoland area and even the country and are recognized for our inclusive, consistent, and responsive programming for people of all backgrounds. I'd like to quickly express our gratitude to the sponsors displayed on our pre-roll slideshow. And before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to let you know just a couple of housekeeping items. We will hold a Q&A session at the conclusion of the program, so please submit your questions directly to me, Wendy Singer at No Shame NSOU, No Shame on You, and we'll address as many questions as possible. And yeah, so that's what, and you know where the beverages are and the restrooms. Feel free to use them anytime. It's now my pleasure to introduce two awesome people who I work with closely throughout my time of being at No Shame on You. And so I'm so excited they're here today. First, I want to introduce Alyssa Robbins, pronouns she, they, is a sexuality and reproductive health educator with a master's degree in public health from Columbia University, over 20 years of relevant experiences. Her past programmatic work is involved in specializing curriculum design, strategic culture partnerships, and intersectional education designed to improve conditions where people access sexuality and reproductive health resources and information. She's also a proud LGBTQIA plus rights activist, musician, pop culture buff, and a student of Spanish language classes. She's currently the director at the Response Center for Teens, part of JCFS Chicago. Christine McCall is an LCSW and CADC, which I believe means Certified Addiction Counselor, and has worked with individuals of all ages experiencing substance abuse, substance misuse, and other mental health concerns for over 15 years. In the nonprofit sector, for over a decade, Christine served as the clinical director overseeing all outpatient programming for teens and emerging adults and created evidence-informed early intervention programs for youth. In her role as JCFS addiction specialist, Christine provides professional training, community education, recovery support, and clinical consultation. Welcome. Take it away, Alyssa and Christine.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I'm going to try and share my screen. And I am currently dealing with I just think it's the month of January. I think I'm going to blame the month of January for this sickness. But I will do my best to not cough into your mic or into the mic so you won't hear me coughing. Can you all see that? Is that working?
Yep.
Great.
We can. It's just not in present mode yet.
Yeah, let me do it in present mode. Um, okay, meeting's being recorded. We got that. The Zoom bar is in the way for me to get presented to you.
Oh,
There we go.
shoot. There it is. You got it. I saw you press it for a second.
Ah, oh my gosh. Hold on. Stop sharing. This is January. This is what we deal with in January.
That's okay. And we give each other grace. There's no
Thank you
shame in
so
not being
much.
able to see the share button.
And I refused to do it. I said, Alyssa, you share.
So now
Thank
I'm this person. Okay. I think we got it now from the beginning.
There we go. That was
Okay.
a super job.
Okay. If I do presenter mode, can people see my notes or is it still just the screen?
Just the screen.
We just
Oh
a
my
screen.
gosh. We did it, y'all. Okay. Meeting over. We nailed the most important part.
Success.
Well, thank you all for joining. And thank you so much to Wendy for having us here. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of my role as director at Response for Teens and just JCFS as a whole, and then Christine will talk about her role at JCFS. We'll start broadly with JCFS as a company. So JCFS, Jewish Child Family Services, does a lot of really valuable and important work throughout the Chicagoland area. I've been with the company for 3 years and I am still learning every day more about what we do throughout Chicagoland. We have immigration services. We do a lot of mental health care. We have disability services. We have a yeshiva and day school. I mean, there's so much that JCFS Chicago does that I feel really proud and honored to work for this organization. Response for Teens is one piece that is under the JCFS umbrella. And then Christine will talk about community services in which she works. So Response has been around for over 50 years. Rumor has it that it began as a teen resource center to combat like drug use and cults. I have yet to verify that information with any kind of actual documentation, but that was the rumor that was given to me when I first came on. We have grown and changed in a number of ways, but today, as we stand, we basically, throughout Chicagoland, do both mental health care for young people. So we have 3 clinicians on staff who see young people in office and then also online for online appointments. So we provide care for young people. We take all insurances, and so there's access for a lot of folks. We also have one of our clinicians who does drop-in services at a local high school, at Highland Park High School, and he's there 2 days a week. So we have this mental health care piece, which is one arm of Response. The other is outreach and education. Our outreach and education is really broad, and I'm very proud of that. We create a lot of bespoke curriculum for a lot of different partnerships, but at its core, we describe ourselves as sexuality educators. And I think when people hear sex ed, they think like, oh, condoms on bananas and like pictures of scary diseases. There is some truth to that. We do talk about those things for sure. We talk about sexual health, we talk about STIs, we talk about contraception. But when we talk about sexuality as a broad topic, we talk about things like communication. We talk about healthy and abusive relationships. We talk about consent. We talk about gender and orientation. We talk about relationships. We talk about addiction, the brain, and substances, right? And we talk about who you can talk to, who are your trusted adults in your life, and what are the resources that provide, excuse me, really credible and relevant information for young people. So again, we do the sex ed piece. That's one piece of it, but I would say sexuality, it really is as inclusive as possible and having so many broad conversations with young people throughout Chicagoland. We have 3 educators on our staff who are full-time and do this work throughout the city. And then we just hired a parent guardian caregiver coordinator who is also working with parents now to have these similar conversations so they have the tools to talk to their young people at home. And so that's really the work of Response. I could say more, like we're doing a karaoke event next week. So we do a lot of stuff. But that's really the bulk of what Response for Teens does. And I'll let Christine talk about her work in community services.
All right. Thanks, Alyssa. So I work within community services, specifically in addiction services. I've been at JCFS for almost 2 years, very part-time, in addition to my clinical practice in the Chicagoland area. A little bit more about me. I've always loved talking about drugs and alcohol with teens. It is a very important part of who I am and what I do, and I find that um, opening up the conversation and exploring these topics that so many teens are feeling like they can't or they shouldn't talk about really leads to just the most amazing conversations. And specifically within addiction services, while we don't provide any direct clinical services for clients within addiction services, we provide community education, consultation, and education around anything and everything related to addiction. And so, whether that's at a synagogue, whether that's on a training or in the community, if people or loved ones are struggling to maybe even wonder, like, is this a problem? Is it not? We have a completely um, no cost service where people can call and we can provide them consultation, help them either get in a support group or find a treatment center that is accessible to them. So just a little bit about who I am and what we do. And I think with that, let's talk about teens and drugs. Favorite topic. So today we're gonna Alyssa and I are gonna tag team this presentation. I will start a little bit about what addiction is and the teen brain. I never know who's coming to this and what their knowledge is, so I like to go with a basic 101 to help understand that we're all using the same definitions and we're all talking about the same thing, specifically about why this matters so much more with the teen brain. I'll talk about overview of current trends, both what the data's seeing and then and what I see in practice and how that's similar and maybe a little bit different. We'll talk about warning signs of substance use for whatever setting you're in, whether that's an educator or a clinician or a parent or a community member. What are some things that to start paying attention to maybe assess if that teen might be looking for from some support. And finally, how to talk with your teens. One of the most important parts of this presentation is how to have these conversations that can feel scary to a parent. And what I see most of the time is parents either use scare tactics, which is what my mother did, or avoidance, right? So want to give you some want you all to walk away with some basic info and some tips and tricks about how to think about and talk about this a little differently. And this is just a bite size appetizer of the world of teen and substance use. And if other questions you might have, we're happy to answer them either today if we have time, or we'll offer our contact information if you have further questions or concerns. Okay, let's move on to the teen brain. So first of all, what are people addicted to? So I always get this question, what are the teens doing these days? What are they addicted to? What's the new hot drug? And the response is usually always the same. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years and it hasn't changed that much. Historically, and we'll see this in the data too, it's with teens and just people in general, most of them it's alcohol and cannabis, or as the kids are calling it, weed. But in a nutshell, you can be addicted to anything. It really isn't about knowing what specific new thing or new drug or what's on the scene, although that can be helpful just as a public health awareness. But addiction is about what it is serving for that individual. You can be addicted to virtually anything. There are a lot of people that are, struggling with exercise, with food, with shopping, with alcohol, with pills, with screens. Screens is a tricky one, and we could do a whole seminar on screen addiction. But again, just because you're seeing someone on their phone a lot, that doesn't necessarily mean they're addicted to the screen. When we think about what is addiction, it's what is that adding and taking away from that person? If I am someone who is I'm getting that dopamine hit from my phone and I'm constantly hitting it. I'm on it all the time because I'm feeling lonely. I'm using that despite having all these consequences, right? I'm not going to school. My grades are failing. I don't have friends. I'm distancing myself from family. That's when it becomes a problem, right? And so that's important to, particularly with games and screening, because I see a lot of times parents, understandably so, get very concerned over the level of gaming that their teen is doing and assuming, right, it's got to be addiction. We got to stop everything. And maybe not, but I think this is where we assess what is that teen using that game for? I see a lot of teens who have a whole social network of friends that are real friends to them that they've never met. They game with them, they're engaging, they're talking. It's kind of like what we all did at the mall back in the day when there were still malls. So that teen isn't, but if they're still going to school, they're still showing up for their friends and family, um, their mental health is intact. It's not necessarily a problem. So the in essence, people can and be addicted to virtually anything. It really is about what it is serving and what it is taking away. So today's youth, first of all, before I talk about everything that they're struggling with, I think today's youth, I think Gen Zers are like the coolest generation. I know they get a lot of slack and people are, there was an article recently that I saw that said Gen Z is the researchers are showing that Gen Zers are less intelligent than their predecessors. And I kind of, what are we calling intelligent, right? Because if we're talking emotional intelligence, the teens that I see now are so much kinder than my generation or above. They're so much more aware of their feelings and it's okay to talk about them. I just think they're a really cool generation, um, despite everything they're going through. So oftentimes, especially for Gen Millennials, Gen Xers, and Boomers, we think of today's youth of being really not being able to handle much. Oh, they're whiners, they're complainers, they have poor work ethic. But look at what they're dealing with. This is the first generation ever that has never known a life without screens, right? They don't know the difference, and that's really impactful and important. This generation also went through COVID at prime developmental times. They missed these huge monumental experiences that other generations got to go through. And that is, even though we are, gosh, 4 years, 5 years past COVID, I guess on whatever year you want to go, we are seeing those effects still, and we will still see it. Like you can't, if you missed 2 years of your developmental adolescent social life, you don't get those back just because the world restarted. Like that will impact you, and that'll be an ongoing thing that you may struggle with. Kids are experiencing stress, and younger more than ever. Not to mention when I talk to these teens and I hear their schedules, right? They have school from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m., which is so early for a teen. And then they have ACT tutoring, and then they have hockey, and they're getting home at 9, 10 at night, and they have homework. It is insane how much pressure that these teens are under, and it's not just the quote unquote high achievers. There are expectations now of kids to be involved um, at this kind of insane level. And that's just kind of part of what our society's developed. For instance, I have a young son and we live in the suburbs, and I'm sure like many areas in this country, a travel sports league is just it is a thing. My son is 6. Thank God he's an artist and not into sports. But if he were into it, he would have already had to start hockey 2 years ago and be in a travel league in order to maybe even make the high school team. That's insanity. And it's just the way it is. So point of that is there's a lot of stress that they're going under. Actually, go back one more. There, right. Thank you. The I also want to point out the two things that are also different about this youth is they've also never known a world without mass school shootings. Just take that a moment to sit in. Gen X, millennials, Gen Xers, boomers, Columbine, a millennial. Columbine happened when I was in, I believe, eighth grade. Before that, I never, like, that was a monumental moment. Kids these days this is a part of their culture. And that kind of level of stress and worry deeply impacts people. Okay, next slide.
Sorry, if I could just add to the slide, and I
Oh,
literally
yeah.
just bumped my desk and it changed slides, so I
Oh, that's
apologize for
okay.
that. But just in our own bubble of response and the clinical care that we do there, we just gave a presentation. We're based in Skokie, Illinois, and we just gave a presentation to the Health and Human Services group there, and the lead of the clinical care there talked about the certain issues that we see among young people, which reflects what Christine talked about. It's a lot of stress around schedule for young people. It's a lot of stress of achievement, hoping that they are the best of the best at all times. Eighth graders, seventh graders already thinking about college. I mean, not to like when I was your age, but I certainly was not thinking about college in seventh and eighth grade. And these stressors are certainly today being put on young people. Lots of questions around gender and identity, orientation and identity. And response in particular, we have a grant to from the Be Well organization to really foster and support both professionals who work with Jewish youth around mental health care, and then also to support young people around their health care that are Jewish identified. And through our work with Be Well, and again, you could segment through all different types of identity, religious orientation, gender. There's all types of conversations we could have around mental health and whatever blank identity. But through the Be Well study they did last year, they were able to survey close to 2,500 Jewish teens throughout the US. And that's like through 49 states, including DC and Puerto Rico. And the survey examined for these Jewish youth, like both their sources of stress and their systems of support. They partnered with Stanford University to be able to get this information. And, it might be to no one's surprise, but both being Jewish was both a stressor and a system of support for these young people. So it's complicated for young people, right? Through any focus or lens of identity, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to grapple with. And so supporting them through their mental health journey, and again, having open and honest conversations can be so helpful as a caring and trusted adult, which is really, at the crux of what we're talking about with this substance conversation today.
Thanks, Melissa. Okay, the teen brain. Um, just to kind of recap the last slide, everyone give Gen Zers a little bit of slack, right? They're dealing with a lot. Um, and we didn't even talk about, the political instability and what is happening right now with, different protests, different, just very grown-up situations that these kids are dealing with right now. So the teen brain. So addiction is um, why it's so important, why I'm so passionate about working with teens and educating teens and parents about um, what they're putting into their brain and body is because the brain is still under construction, right? We know that our reward system um, it develops faster than our judgment center. So the part of our brain that needs to eat, needs to is all run by dopamine, essentially. So when a kid, when we use a substance, we get a big reward, right? That's a dopamine rush, right? And we feel good. And as a teen, who doesn't want to feel good and feel immediately better than they were previously? The problem is with the teen brain is that their judgment part, the judgment that's like, well, I have class. Should I get high in the bathroom right now? Probably not. That's not developed. They are not thinking that way. They can't think that way. And so when you talk to a teen about use your judgment, like they can't. And so that's important to remember as a parent, a community educator, when you develop frustrations about why are they making such bad decisions. It's because part of being a teen is experimenting, but they have no guardrails up. And so that's where we need to help them. Um, and so the other problem is that substance use is a learning pathway, right? Like if I am very anxious and I'm stressed and I start drinking and I feel relaxed, I feel good, I feel carefree, my brain is learning if I take this, then I will feel this way, right? And so the problem that happens if long term we we do this, we reinforce that pathway. And so now, let's say I have a teen and they've been using weed to relax when they're stressed, and they've been using for a couple of years. They've kind of solidified that pathway. Now, when they think about, I need to relax, they're not thinking about maybe I should take deep breaths, maybe I should watch a TV show, maybe I should go for a walk. They're thinking, I got to hit my vape. And so that's the big problem with teens is that the earlier they're using, the longer long-term addiction potential just significantly increases. There's a, a staggering statistic that 90% of people who are have a substance use disorder started using substances before age 18. So we know the younger you use, the more likely you are going to have to addiction. And the thing that is cool about this generation is that if you come in and you talk to them like a dare officer, for all of our millennials and up, they shut down because it's late, right? And it doesn't work. But if you talk to them about the brain and if you give them information, they are listening and they don't actually know this and they themselves want options. And I always talk about it when I'm talking teen, like, do you want to have more options for yourself as an adult? Like, and all I'm like, well, yeah, like I want to be able to do cool things. I want to be able to go to parties and like get to concerts and maybe have like said your best bet is to slow the roll down. You've got to give your brain some space to develop and that judgment part of your brain to fully form so that you can make these decisions for yourself. Next slide, please. So some actually really good news. I know like this may seem all like grim and dire, but when we look at the statistics, so we use there's a report, the Monitoring the Future report from 2024. It shows that substance use still remains at historic low levels. Uh, Not saying that it's not problematic and we should quit all our prevention works, but rather the opposite. I think all of the prevention efforts, all of the discussions that we've been doing are really showing that it is stabilizing youth substance use. Alcohol still remains the most common. That really hasn't changed too much. Vaping, nicotine, and cannabis are still prevalent but stable. So I'm going to show you what the data shows, and then I'm going to talk about what I see clinically and working in the school. The thing that is concerning is there's declines in perceived harm for cannabis and vaping products. I absolutely see this. The people are more, which if you think something isn't harmful, you're more likely to use it because like what's the harm? So I know for us that are in Illinois, cannabis was legalized during COVID. And so what didn't happen because we were trying to figure out COVID and trying to figure out what to do, um, there was not a lot of prevention campaign. There was not a lot of real thoughtful kind of rollout about how do we also legalize cannabis and also have messaging around um, the harms that it poses still. We kind of miss that. And I think that the effects now, what we are seeing that real term is when I work with teens, I'm seeing 12-year-olds vaping can like and really thinking that it's legal, it's natural, it's fine. And so there is this catch-up education piece that we are needing. So this is what the data shows. What I am seeing and working in practice is a lot of weed use, a lot of cannabis use at school. Um, it is something that I think people are not they're paying attention to or pretending it's not a problem. Very few schools, um, at least in our area, have specific intervention programs to address people that are using on site or a problem. So I am hopeful of all the data, but I also am worried about what I am seeing as far as the normalization and the continued cannabis use in problematic ways. Like you should not be high at school all day, right? Sometimes when I work with the teen, the goal is can you save, like ideally don't use, but okay, if you're not able to get there, can you save it for after school or on the weekends? And so I'm seeing kind of this like intersection of weed use just becoming kind of part of the daily life and using it in just regular situations. Next
And
slide.
just to piggyback really quick on what Christine said, she talked through the clinical lens and through the educator lens, we see very similar attitudes towards things, particularly like cannabis, that it's this natural thing and that it's legal. So what is the harm in doing it, right? And so we go back to what Christine said, which is like your brain and body, right? Like this is at the core of what we're talking about, that, here are the patterns of addiction. Here's what it could do. Here's what's developing in you currently, right? Like all of that science is there in the conversation. I also always find that young people want to know, like, how far can I go, right? Like, they want to know where the line is and what they can and can't cross. And I always have to say, well, there is no line, right? It differs for every single person. It differs for substance. It differs in there's so many factors involved here that I can't give you a line, but they really don't want to cross. I mean, they really want to know where it is and they don't want to get too deep. I think the idea of DARE, which was a horrible thing, which I did experience as a young person, was really just like, we're going to cut it off. We're going to say no. That's it, right? Because that's the line and that's where we need to draw it. That's unrealistic, right? But we can tell young people, like, there is no line and the line is ambiguous, but here's why, right? Like, having these conversations, talking through all these things with them, I think can be so important for them to have this knowledge. So when we talk through warning signs, the first and foremost thing is that like your young person the best. And so if there's concern in any way, right, to open up those lines of communication. Hazelton Betty Ford, which actually has a program that when I was full-time teaching, we welcomed into our school. They bring in people who are former addicts and they talk through their journey and they talk through like where they're at now, where they came from, how they moved through this addiction and why they speak to young people today. And it was really poignant for a lot of young people to hear, personal stories. I think that's it can really touch the heart, right? When you're not just reading through statistics or like talking through slides, you're actually hearing somebody's personal story. But from their website, these were things to look for young people in terms of warning signs. So ignoring friends and family, right? Like not engaging in ways that they were before with people that are close to them. Perhaps like catching them in white lies about where they were, what they were doing, and just things that feel arbitrary, but like, why would you lie about it? Frequently asking for money and not really giving reasons as to why, or shifting in stories about like why this cash was needed for this and why you need more for this other thing. Just things that might raise your hackles, right? Where you're like, what? This is confusing to me. Physical change, so change in weight, bloodshot eyes, nosebleeds. Perhaps you're seeing like longer shirts being worn if there's a risk of injection, and trying to hide any injection points. And just a general loss of interest in things that were once important to them. I think, developmentally young people, we've mentioned this many times, they're going through a lot, right? So there can be shift in emotion, and obviously they're physically changing a lot through puberty and through their teen years. Like really like look at what is normal, growth and adaptation in their teen years, and then what might be really like, hey, this feels beyond that, right? This feels like something that is of concern. And then again, opening those lines of communication, which we'll give like tips and tricks for that for slides coming up.
So what to do when you're concerned? Um, don't uh, uh, don't try to run your own intervention. I guess first and foremost, I get a lot of calls of, okay, we're concerned about this family member. I've got the whole family here. How do we run an intervention? I say, don't do it. Can you imagine walking into a room and being cornered? Like it just does not work out well. So lead with curiosity, not consequences. So addiction is there's a reason they're using. There's a reason they're doing this. We need the path to healing and recovery is figuring out the why and how we heal the why. Uh, watch watch for patterns, not one-off behaviors. So teens part of a developmental process of a teen is risk taking. We have to take risks as a teen to learn about who we are and what we need. Um, to kind of piggyback what Alyssa said, I once was doing an education session for a class, and afterwards this kid walks up, he's like, so if someone like s- smokes weed like twice a week, like is that okay for the brain? And so um they taking risks, knowing how much they can is just what teens are, and that's okay. That's who we've always been. So if you found out that your teen um has used or experimented, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are like headed to lifelong addiction. So have that conversation, but watch for patterns, not just one-time behaviors. Or like they got one F. It's like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're addicted. Stay connected. The best that kids want to talk, they want to be connected. They and so it's having that relationship where they feel like they can come to you if they're struggling, but also knowing that like they want their own autonomy. It's a tricky balance for parents. Set clear, caring boundaries. You can set no use messages, and expectations in the household, and we want to help you, and we don't want anything bad to happen to you. So if you need help, we will not scream at you. Um, we will not punish you. We'll help you. And know when to get extra support. Don't compare your own teen experiences. Kids do not care about your teen. They just like, because it's not. I mean, like, we didn't go through what they're going through. Like, it's just irrelevant. So just don't. Um, and don't isolate. Talk to your friends, talk to other teen parents. Like, I feel like there is this shame that we feel like we can't talk about what we're experiencing, but we're all experiencing the same thing. So be connected with other parents, be connected, and also know who um, who your kids are hanging out with, who the parents are, so that when we are concerned, we can reach out.
Um, I have a very young child. I have a 16-month-old, and somebody recently shared with me that, you're so connected to parents when your kids are young because you're both there and you're setting up play dates and you're like hanging out together and you like find the parents you can chat with and like the kids play. But as they get older, that tends to you don't have that experience as much with parents. And it's like so important that you do at this time because of all the factors that we're talking about. And so just to echo what Christine said about staying connected to parents. This is, it echoes a lot of what Christine just mentioned, but, even if you don't have a concern, even if you think like, I don't think my kid's using and I don't really see an issue, or the young people that I work with, like, I just don't see this, like, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be having these conversations, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't be talking to them about it, and coming at it in a way that is curious and not like, if I ever hear of any, like that's just not the way to approach these conversations with young people. So, what have you heard? Keep it relevant to like what's going on in their world. I mean, if you see something happening on, a commercial or some other cultural moment, right? Like Justin Bieber just performed at the Grammys. Like, what did you think? Did you hear that he like smokes weed on his Instagram? Like, what do you think about that? Right? Like talking through those things that can be relevant and timely, and listening to what they say, right? Like asking questions and then really listening. and tapping into their thoughts and feelings about these things, right? We're not trying to like literally sit down and have the quote unquote talk with these young people, even though we kind of are, right? But we're disguising it because they are really smart and they tap into that and, I roll commence and then they're out. Um, so talking through these things, do talk about risk. Again, I think it's really important. They do want to know the line and recognize like what's the legal consequence here, right? What's the physical consequence? What's the emotional consequence? What's your personal value, family consequence, right? Like, how do you think and feel about these things? And gosh, my job as a parent is to keep you safe. And I would be so scared. I'd be so scared if I felt like you were unsafe or if you were in a situation where you were, blackout drunk and couldn't figure out how to get home. Like that's so scary to me. I think not guilt tripping them, but like really talking through your values as a family around these things. And then just showing interest in what they're doing, right? Like how they're participating in things on their phone or tablet. And gaming, we have a whole separate conversation and training that we do around online gambling and gaming, because that is also a huge issue for young people. But tapping into those things and like checking in into the things that they are interested in and seeing like what are they seeing, right? What is influencing their thoughts and feelings? But yeah, coming at it in a curiosity and really listening to what they have to say.
Okay, navigating community resources. So oftentimes we'll hear like, where do I go? And obviously people are coming from all over the country here. So it would not be useful for us to talk about where to go in Illinois. But in general, wherever you are located, uh, these are some kind of tips about if you are concerned, if you just even want to check your gut, your instinct, where you can go. So utilizing your schools, your community centers, and your religious institutions. So these are the places within your own community that will know where to go. They can offer recommendations. You, of course, can always call JCFS Addiction Services. We don't help, we help anyone in the country, not just people in Illinois. If you just even wanted some tips about, I live in Houston, where do I even get started? And we can certainly help with that. Um, it's important if you are a clinician and you are working with someone in an addiction, like let's say you're working with a teen or a parent and they're finally open, like I want some help. Do not just hand them a phone number. The likelihood of that person calling is is very minimal. And so really coming out and asking for help when you're struggling with addiction is a huge deal and a moment in time. You've got to get that moment when it's happening. And so I can't strongly urge enough to call with them, right? Call if you're like, I want to go to rehab. Great. Let's make some calls together. Let's see what the intake process is, what's involved when there's openings, what you need to do, so that when they leave, if you're a clinician, they leave your office, they know and it's written down what the very basic next steps are. Go to Hazelden for intake tomorrow at 10 a.m. That makes a huge difference. And not to forget resources for teens and family. So addiction is not, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Like we need to support everyone involved in that system so that um, they can all go through the healing process together and on their own.
Just to add on to in terms of schools, I mean, we, in the Chicagoland area, we work with schools. That's our bread and butter. Schools want to be hosting these conversations. They really do. So if you're a parent who is like interested in asking your school community, hey, do you have these conversations around addiction and drugs and alcohol use? Like, what age does it start? What are you all actually talking about? What's the approach here? Right? Like, schools want to be talking to young people about these things because, as Christine mentioned, they're dealing with it on their campuses and they are figuring out protocol and how to best approach these young people who might be struggling in some way, shape, or form, or have like broken a major rule, how are we taking care of these young people and continuing like to support them and also know that there's consequence for action, right? Like schools are really struggling with that. I'll just give a shout out to libraries. Libraries are magic places and they host a lot of different conversations. And so Skokie Public Library has hosted things around mental health and substance use. And I'm sure nationwide, your local magical library is doing something related to these conversations for young people and for families that support them. And that is all we have. Um, are there any questions? And again, I want to thank Christine for this conversation and Wendy for hosting it. And I made it through without coughing uh, with my mic on. So kudos to me.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. This was clear and simple and helpful. I did get two questions in the chat. One question is there any data that shows if there is a difference to teens' brains who have ADHD and some anxiety and depression who are using cannabis?
I love that question because I also love talking about ADHD. Um, I can't off the top of my head, the answer is yes. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I will say that because ADHD, um, it's a dopamine deficiency in many ways, right? And so I see a lot of times people that are using cannabis are self-medicating who have ADHD are self-medicating with cannabis. So whenever I see a referral that's a teen boy that got caught vaping in school, I say, I do the assessment. I'm like, curious, do you have ADHD? Yes. Are you taking medication? No. And I see this so often that I got a separate certification in ADHD because there is such a strong correlation with it. And we know with ADHD that they have poor impulse. It takes their brain longer to develop that part that impulse control is related to. And so I think even more so if you have ADHD, I do know one statistic. I think it's if you have ADHD, you are 16 times more likely to develop a substance use disorder if you're not medicated or it's not being treated. So it is
Hmm.
something to pay attention to.
Thank you. Um, and for somebody, I appreciate that. And for somebody who says they know their child has opened up about experimenting with um, cannabis use, and they want to thread the line of being open, supportive, and engaging, how do we learn when it's time to, any tips and tools for how you learn when to be really concerned?
Sure, great question. I would start with age, right? If your 12-year-old is coming to, and which I see, if they're coming to you saying that they're experimenting with cannabis, that is much, much more concerning and should have a elevated response than if you have, for instance, an 18-year-old.
Mhm.
Because again, we know that 12-year-olds mostly aren't in situations where there's going to be cannabis, right? That's either they're in a situation where and maybe friends' homes, or they are struggling with anxiety, depression, ADHD, whatever it is. There's something that's happening. 18-year-olds, for better or worse, are in situations where cannabis is just accessible much more, right? So I think starting with age, I then start getting more information, right? When, um, how, like, and also like how they're using makes a difference. Are they taking edibles? Are they smoking? Are they vaping? There is varying levels of THC potency in all different forms. Um, and being curious, not furious, right? Like and then be able to help that teen develop boundaries based on the values that they have, that your family has, and the expectations. So I don't think I actually answered the question at all, other than I would start with um, what the age is and what the use is, why they're using. And I think from that, we can kind of develop more kind of nuanced conversations.
And then there was a last follow-up question because of the question about ADHD. Is there any negative consequences to using cannabis while on ADHD medication and treatment that way that you
I
know of?
mean, I think like anything, I don't think there's anything specific of like interaction between cannabis and the ADHD meds. Um, but like with any medication, if you're using substances on top of that, um, you're not going to see the intended effect, right? The your progress from ADHD or your not progress, but I guess how you're coping with it and how the medication can help you cope with it is not going to be as effective if you're also getting high. But I don't think there's any, at least I haven't seen nor have I read anything about a dangerous interaction between the meds and cannabis.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes the questions in my chat, and I want to thank you guys so much for coming and being such awesome partners with No Shame on You. We appreciate you so much. We put surveys in the chat. If you have a minute to fill it out, we really would be grateful. It helps us make sure we're hitting the mark and report back to our generous funders. And our next Feed Your Mind, remember we do them monthly, is on Wednesday, February 25th. This one was delayed from last week. So we have two this February. This one is called Camp Ready, preparing your child and yourself for the emotional journey of camp, summer camp. And one of the things No Shame on You does, and I think Response Center actually might do some of it. JCFS certainly does, is camp training of staff on different topics. And we're partnering No Shame on You with a woman who I actually went to college with. And we took a camping class together our senior year. And part of it was we designed our own summer camps, and we both ended up being camp directors for a long time. I was a camp director for about 18 years prior to JCC Chicago, and she owned a day camp on the East Coast. So we are partnering with her, Dr. Anat Geva, our Director of Strategic Initiatives, and Jamie Sirkin, who also has her MSW and is a mental health advocate, about is camp ready? Are you ready for camp when mental health is a concern? And what do you do? And all those kind of things. So thank you guys. We will see you soon and have a great rest of your week. Happy Friday.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Thanks, everyone.